Welcome to Inaudible. I'm your host, Jeremy Weiland, and I'm joined by my co host, Nithin Reddy. On this podcast, we discuss the weird, beautiful channeled messages found in the long tradition of contact with the Confederation of Planets in service to the one infinite creator. These messages articulate a philosophy of spiritual evolution, popularly known as the Law of One. Many of these messages are available to listen to on our sister podcast, Living, Love, and Light, available on all platforms. Hi, Ryan. We seek to provide analysis and commentary on this philosophy described in these messages, identifying the common themes and grappling with the application of this information to our human lives. However, we are not counselors, gurus, or experts of any kind, so please evaluate our words in light of our shortcomings and use your own best judgment. Thanks for listening. Thanks for continuing to hold on during this extended hiatus. And welcome back to the podcast, Nithin. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Thank you. It has been a long hiatus, but it's good to be back. How are you?
I am doing a lot better. As I explained to folks in the bonus episode, the brief little segment that I shared along with that archetypes presentation. I had a tough time just with different things going on in my life, and I think I can't blame it on life completely. I think maybe I just needed to unplug from the Confederation focus for a little bit and just find. Well, that's kind of what this podcast is going to be about. I want the theme to be depression and renewal. Which one of the points I'll be making on this episode is the link between those two. And I think I needed to deal with some things and clear out some things in my own life. So I'm doing okay. Got a new car, got a new phone, um, and am getting, like I was just telling you, I'm getting ready to do another Richmond session with the Richmond Meditation Circle in a couple of weeks. So getting back on the horse of practicing contact, really getting back into daily meditation instead of just sporadic meditation. Um, like I've said before in this podcast, when you're depressed, when you're unhappy with your life, when you're unhappy with events, the last person you want to sit with is yourself. And that's pretty much what meditation is. So I feel like I'm on the other side of it. And I didn't want to really record until I was. Not because I have any or any problem with being a person having problems on camera, on mic, in front of people. In fact, I think that's good to demonstrate a human life in all of its 100 or 360-degree aspects. But now that I'm on the other side of it, I kind of can see a little bit better than I did before. And I just didn't have the energy. So, in fact, it was a little difficult to figure out when I would have the energy. So there was a time where I just needed to make a commitment to recording. And you and I have had a false start or two recording this, but now we're back. And I feel like the human emotional side of this philosophy, setting aside contact with extraterrestrials or entities, setting aside all of the spiritual concepts that we use to describe this life that we live, and just focusing on life raw and right there in front of your face without you having to put it in a box or describe it in some intellectual way. Um, was kind of a counterbalance to the theme of last year, which was trying to get this archetypal um, account from me and Steve, uh, all set, all delivered. You know, I like I said on the bonus episode, to me that was a big accomplishment. It was something that I'd wanted to do since this podcast began, because I never felt like there was a very intelligent treatment of the archetypes that came from a place of having studied them for decades and decades. Um, this just isn't on offer from LO research or other people who study the Confederation philosophy, um, because it's so difficult, because the language for it is very challenging. And I don't want to say that only people who have this sort of theoretical or intellectual approach can deal with it. In fact, I think the exact opposite. But it is hard to talk about it without the kinds of concepts that a doctorate degree in philosophy can give you. So I wanted Steve to be part of that, to help me with that, and I feel like that work will stand the test of time and help inspire people to come up with their own approaches. Um, the whole idea being, I don't want people to just take what we say verbatim. I want them to be inspired by this approach to find their own approach. I've always hated approaches to the archetypes that try to codify and say, well, this is what it is, this is what it's not. So just learn this by rote. I don't think that is, because it's not really about learning the archetypes. It's really about learning about yourself. If you don't have a grounding of these archetypes in the material of your own experience and your own self, then you are just learning, philosophy. So I tend to accomplish things and then need to step away. That has been a pattern in my life for a while. So even beyond depression, even beyond life events, it probably was good to take a break after 62 episodes where I've never gone more than 2 months without recording. Uh, so I'm doing okay, to answer your question. I feel
Yeah.
like I owe an accounting, and I really don't. But I hope everybody can just appreciate that I'm a human being that works a job, that has a life, that has my own distortions, my own flaws, my own crappy parts that need to be worked on. And the funny thing is that, just to jump into the topic, is when you're depressed, all you can see are those crappy things. And it isn't until you're able to kind of, to get a different perspective, that you can kind of say, yes, that is a part of me that is dark, but that's not all of me, right? When you're depressed, that's all you can see. All you can see is the crappy. All you can see is the dead end, all that.
Agreed. So when we use the word depression, um, there's many I think different ways to think about it. How would you characterize that term?
I would love to hear your characterization, because I'm going to come at you with a bunch of quotes.
So probably I would, it's hard to I think it's hard to define. I haven't looked up the clinical definition or the dictionary definition, but I think many of us have experienced depression in our lives, right? Kind of when it when you see it or experience it personally. I would just say it's an intense and um, intense and sustained period of pain and like mental or spiritual pain, but non-physical pain. I think is a better way to put it. Non-physical pain and emotional anguish. Um, that yeah.
Yeah, I just looked up the definition of depression, and it's a clinical definition, right? A mood disorder characterized by persistent sadness, loss of interest or pleasure in activities, and other symptoms that interfere with daily functioning. That's definitely where I was. I was able to pull it out with the job and all that. I was able to not lose my marriage or to lose many friendships. I don't think I lost any, actually, but if you withdraw, you're putting it on the line, right? It's possible that you can lose these things. And that does remind me, there is one person who was very important to the book coming out last year that I need to reconnect with. But anyway, I'm really interested in what the Confederation says about this. Now, uh, depression, the word, or depressed, in my search through the raw contact, does not occur as a term. But you had found a lot of stuff about sorrow. Was there anything in particular in your review of Ra's words that stood out to you that you would want to start with? Because otherwise, we'll just jump in with Hatan and Kuo and Latui. Definitely Latui.
In terms of like kind of giving us a starting point, the only, I mean, there's one raw quote I liked, but I don't know if it's a good starting point. It just talks about um energy transfers that can take place when one entity is talking to another, specifically about the when the speaker is experiencing mental slash emotional complex distortions towards anguish, sorrow, or other mental pain. Uh, but yeah, Raw doesn't really seem to. Obviously, they don't use the word depression, and they use the word sorrow a lot, but it's more of a generalized term.
Okay.
So I'll leave it to you, Jeremy, to
Yeah,
start
yeah,
us where
that's
you think
fine.
we need to be started.
Jump in with anything raw related if it
Okay.
comes to mind. In the meantime, I've done a lot of reading in the conscious library, and there's a couple of themes to depression. Um, One is a kind of cutting off of the source of energy or nourishment to the soul or the self, because of a rejection of circumstances or rejection of the self in a wholesale manner. Depression can be an opportunity for renewal, for cleansing, for the genuine experience and invocation of the matrix of mind as that blank, unfed, receptive mind that isn't trying to reconcile something new with something that you're already holding on to, but you've released that, right? And so you're completely open. And the pain wears you down in that way. Um, Depression can be one of these instances of Ra talking about catalysts going awry. Um, those of Ra in session 34 say, "We observed your interest in the catalyst of pain. This experience is most common among your entities. The pain may be of the physical complex, more often it is of the mental and emotional complex. In some few cases, the pain is spiritual in complex nature. This creates a potential for learning. The lessons to be learned vary. Almost always, these lessons include patience, tolerance, and the ability for the light touch. And just to jump in, all three of those things are the opposite of what the self can bring to bear on experience when they're in this depressed state. That should be obvious. That light touch, no, everything's taken as like the worst thing in the world. There's no tolerance for the self, and there's often not tolerance for others. And the same thing with patience. To continue with question 6 from this session, very often the catalyst for emotional pain, whether it be the death of the physical complex of one other self, which is loved, or some other seeming loss, will simply result in the opposite, in a bitterness, an impatience, a souring. This is catalyst which has gone awry. In these cases, then, there will be additional catalysts provided to offer the unmanifested self further opportunities for discovering the self as an all sufficient creator, containing all that there is and full of joy. So, um, it's interesting because reading that last sentence, I realized that that is what I'm representing as my trajectory over the last 6 months. Is that I have somehow, in spite of all of this heartache and bitterness and souring, uh, found a way to at least begin to start seeing myself as a creator that is complete, and that there's things to celebrate. Like for instance, I had to buy a new car. I do not like having a car payment again. It's really not a good time for it, but the idea that I don't have to worry about this car breaking down for a while because it's got a 5-year warranty and everything's taken care of, that's a reason to celebrate and to mark a step forward. It's not perfect, right? It has downsides to it, but everything has downsides and upsides. So uh, it's a matter of my perspective. It's my choice of attitude, right? And the fact that I am making strides towards taking that other attitude, I think, shows me that okay, you're not wallowing in the pits of despair anymore. You're making efforts to come out, and when those efforts build upon each other, then you can really do something about where you're at. There is a Confederation quote that I felt was really apropos here. On May 2nd, 2004, Kuo told the Yellow Research Circle, lastly, you questioned concerning how to avoid bitterness and how to encourage the self not to use catalysts awry. That is perhaps a topic we may save for another day in terms of really moving into it. But in general, we may say that one is almost never able to see ahead of time, that one is going to be bitter, defensive, angry, and so forth. So one is not able to defend against such times. They simply come upon one, and one finds oneself in the shadows and very unhappy for one reason or another, and in one way or another, depending upon the personality shell. When you're in the soup, there is no use objecting to yourself because you fell or because you're wet. Bitterness comes into life because it is a way to keep the attention away from getting out of the soup. The energy of one who has run afoul of catalyst and is struggling can be focused in one of two ways. It can be focused in trying to stay afloat, or it can be focused in trying to get out of the cup of soup. Climbing the slippery china walls of your cup is not easy, and it requires far different skills than treading water. However, those who tread water shall be doomed to repeat the exercise, never being allowed to drown, and never, while treading water, able to garner the energy that is required for the tremendous effort needed to break the pattern and create a ladder of will and discipline that allows you to clamber over that china cup and get out of the soup. There is no question that it is easier to tread water, stay in the soup, and repine concerning the difficulty that one is in than it is to gather the energies and create by will and faith alone that ladder out of the situation and back to the sense of owning the self and not being a victim of circumstance. However, it is through such work that one is able to move through the refining fire, not burning to a cinder, but rather becoming more and more tempered, more and more burnished, and more flexible. Yeah, that's from like one of the main sessions that I had. That's why I didn't have a. That's why I couldn't find the excerpt. Um, that to me is a. Although the soup analogy is weird, like it is the kind of thing I can remember feeling low and feeling like the only thing I can do is kind of just tend to my wounds here and just be where I'm at. And frankly, like I didn't want to pretend to be anything else on this podcast, to the working group, or to even to the Richmond group. Um, I mean, we never stopped meeting in Richmond, but I know there were times when I was a little distant. I'm sure the members could tell. And so there was just a point at which I had been in the soup long enough, and no matter whether it was going to be a slog or not, I had resolved that this time was over. I don't know why. I don't know how. Uh, just was, you know.
Yeah, I love how it talks about you know, will, faith, power. I think there's some other areas where it talks about acceptance, but I would say those concepts were key in helping um, getting me out of my depression for sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, faith, power, will, acceptance, all of those are very hard when you're dealing with depression, something you're depressed about.
Yeah. Oh, I should also mention I'm not the only one who's depressed, and I'm not the only one who's depressed at this moment in history. Let's be clear. Overarching anything that was personal is just the complete rejection, in a way, of the political situation in the country that I'm a citizen of. How disappointing, how completely, utterly abandoned I feel by the world in which I created a self. And not knowing how we're going to get out of this. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I mean, I hope you're not doing any pro bono work for cops yet, but Attorney General Bondi may be on your butt about that soon, Nithin.
That's true.
Anyway, I don't want to go down a political route because for me, politics is very catalytic. It always has been a big source of personal catalyst. And when I first really had my awakening 10 years ago, almost to the month, I saw this great opportunity to engage in the project of humanity that didn't require me to convince or cajole anybody to follow me or for me to follow them or to come up with some program. No. If we focus on the evolutionary path, the timeline is longer. There's more acceptance. And it doesn't mean that we don't do work that's needed in the real world, but we don't think that it's the end all be all because there's a cosmic perspective involved. And that this kind of thing has happened before. It's happened worse than it's happening now. And it won't stay like this forever. It just can't. That's not how things work. Whether it's 100 years, 500 years, whatever, the human spirit will assert itself in its other polarity eventually. And so I feel like this time the election of Trump hit me a lot harder than last time, but I'm feeling like, okay, this is something that I planned my life around. So obviously I don't have to approve of it, but I do have to accept that not only is this political situation extant, but it is a reflection in some important way, not a complete way, but some important way of my fellow man, the people that I live around. And that is something I can take into meditation every day and work on.
Yeah, it's just hard. I think for a lot of people, whether spiritual or not, there's a lot of expectation that's kind of baked in to what happens politically. And when there's a lot of expectation, it's just really hard to accept something that goes against that expectation. And it's
and
often,
when everybody is feeling that way, there is a vibratory, energetic element to it that I don't want to put the focus on it because then we start becoming woo woo and we're disconnected. We're not, because one of the things that I think is important about balancing our distortions, especially when we feel overwhelmed by our distortions, is a kind of responsibility that we take for it. We take
absolutely.
We're not necessarily the originator of Catalyst, right? And yet, nevertheless, it's ours. It's ours to take responsibility for. I didn't ask for this body, but it's mine to take responsibility for. It's the same with our experience of life, same with the experience of Catalyst. And I think there's a good quote that talks a little bit about how we pick up on these things and how they affect our mood and our overall look on life, and that we always have this choice. It's October 15th, 2005. And Kuo says, the one known as Willie Nelson once said in an interview this instrument heard that he did not understand why people were so complimentary about melodies. He said the melodies are in the air. When I need one, I just start listening and I pick one up. In just that way, as planetary influence in all of its inner and outer expressions goes through the tremendous alteration necessary to create fourth density Gaia, it is singing many melodies. Some of the melodies are coming from the planet itself. Some of those melodies are coming from those who are here to assist and those who are attempting to graduate along the lines of service to others. Some of the melodies are being created from the unseen world who are here to assist those calling for help on the path of service to self. Therefore, some of the melodies are unimaginatively light and beautiful, while others are difficult and dark. These melodies all have the right to sing their song within the influence of Earth at this time. Each of them has a beauty, and there is a certain seduction or persuasion involved in both the light and the dark melodies. It is, as always, the choice of each of you as to what melodies you shall pick up and hold to your hearts, and which of those melodies you will choose not to focus upon. See, just to interject, I think this is where Willie was being a little bit obtuse, because the point is not that the melodies are out there. The point is that he knows how to pick them, right? He knows how to take that melody and find the right musicians and put together something, I mean, I've been listening to, what's that song? I forget. Anyway, I've been listening to some Willie lately, so it's funny that this came up. Okay, so we choose which melodies we're going to focus on. Kuo continues. Now, each of you is familiar with the process of choosing what melodies, in a purely physical sense, to listen to, and what melodies to ignore. Every elevator that has Muzak is offering you a melody that you hope you will forget, most probably. Each store that you enter, particularly in the time of year which is coming up for you at this point, I think this is Christmas, is going to offer you melodies that you may hum, or you may decide to forget. And so it is with these incredible waves of energy that are hitting your planet at this time, whether they come from the planet or whether they come from unseen realms surrounding your planetary influence. We suggest firstly that you respect and honor all of these melodies. Secondly, we suggest you make a point of choosing which waves of energy you shall cooperate with, and which waves of energy you shall not resist, but simply not take seriously. The dark energy of which you speak is one which, as each of you has expressed, has been felt not only by you, but also by many, many others with whom you have spoken the last few days. If you follow these waves of energies and ask entities with whom you come into contact about them, you will discover these waves of energy are system-wide. They are global. Entities are feeling them all over the planet. And so we ask you, what shall you choose? We would suggest to you that there is no need to have any fear simply because dark melodies are being played. Choose instead to sing Alleluia, Alleluia, and you shall tune into the more positive melodies. Even if you do not feel you can sing a note, let your heart sing for you. The unheard songs are the sweetest. I love that last part.
No, it's a great quote, and it kind of brings to the forefront, I think, the struggle when you're in a deep depression, which is, it kind of pulls you in, or the entire perspective of depression, it kind of pulls you into this, what I would call this idea of physical reality is primary and the spiritual aspect is secondary. And if you can move through faith, acceptance, the will, and power to a place where you realize the spiritual aspect of reality is primary and the physical is secondary, or at least that there's parity.
Yeah.
At least that there's parity. Because if you give physical reality the primacy, that's when the reasons, the logic that are often fear-based start kicking in. And a lot of times, if you're very, very rational and logic about it, a lot of the fears are not quantifiable. They might be logical, but you can't even put a percentage on them. But the thing is, usually the fear takes over and it makes it seem like whatever the percentage is, it's very real, very high, very imminent. And a lot of time, especially when it comes to politics, anything in mainstream consciousness, especially if it can be related to a fear, there's other energies at play that want to take advantage of those fears within us, right? So it's very hard to make that movement from I have to worry about this. I have to look at this.
Yeah.
I have to figure out this physical reality problem first, and then I can worry about my emotions and my mental state versus understanding the catalyst was given to you to dive deep, to look at, your mental state and your spiritual state. It doesn't mean you're not going to do nothing physically, but that it's coming from a place of acceptance and balance and faith, as opposed to a place of fear.
Absolutely. That idea that we have to figure out how in the physical reality all this is going to work out, that too is a type of responsibility taking, is it not?
Absolutely.
It's just which self are we going to choose to be? The one that
Right.
takes responsibility primarily for our place in the world, or the self that takes responsibility primarily for being a conduit into the world of something that we don't have to know, we don't have to prepare or or contrive, right?
Exactly. It's like the more you look into the Confederation philosophy, and frankly, more than a few world religions, mystical Hinduism, I think Buddhism as well, aspects of Buddhism, the idea that the self is all, it, it's not just an abstract idea. And yes, because of the infinity involved, you can't necessarily always show one-to-one correlation with, oh, this happened in my life because of this inside of me. But that's the concept. So it makes sense that what you're experiencing is intimately related with how you're relating it to it emotionally and spiritually, and that part of the relationship is just as important, and what action you're taking with respect to what you're feeling spiritually and mentally internally is just as important as the physical action you're taking outside to deal with the external triggering catalyst.
One way that I would like to approach that would be to talk about the concept of going in circles versus the spiritual perspective of the spiraling. So this is something that Confederation contexts bring up not infrequently when they talk about how it may seem that you're going through the same issues over and over again, and that can be a depressing thing. I know for me it was, you know, um, but if you, but that is looking at it from the point of view of the world, that this issue just keeps recurring. What you don't see is the progress that you've made in the past with it that has gotten you to the point where you're dealing with it in this new way. Instead of us going just instead of the whole Yellow King idea that time is a flat circle, you have this idea of spiraling. So you're always on a plane, but that plane is moving up. It's I hope it's analogous to the upward spiraling light in some important respect. And to that point, and the point of the situation in the world and the kind of responsibility we're taking for the illusion and Maya, I wanted to read this Kuo excerpt from almost exactly 20 years ago, May 1st, 2005. Um, let's see, where should I begin with this? So, someone's asking about depression and what the incarnation could be about. Yeah, you're on the right part in the notes, Nithin. Um, and they say, could you comment briefly? Kuo says, again, we have trouble dealing with this in words because it would be handy to think of this sort of process as having a beginning, a middle, and an ending. To jump in, I'd say that's how the world considers things. It's a process with a beginning and an end, and you're at some point in the middle of that. Kuo continues, but in actuality, in consciousness, you were swimming in states of awareness. See, the world wants to look at it quantitatively, but in the concept of spirit, this is me talking, in the concept of spirit, we're dealing more with qualities. And those are much closer to the time space experience and much more difficult to express um, consistently and reliably in this world in ways that can be obvious and picked up on by people all the time. To continue with Kuo, so you are swimming in states of awareness. And because you have come into a state of awareness once, does not mean that you have finished a process. It means that you have found yourself in a certain state of consciousness. Once you have found it, at least if you trust in yourself, you can believe it and you know it is there and it is something that you can seek once again. But spiritual evolution is not a straight line, it is a spiral. It is like you are walking up stairs that move around the hub of self in terms of your experiences, so that as you come to that same place again, you can say to yourself, I recognize this place, this state of mind. I know this. I've been here before. But you actually are in a different place because you have spiraled into that place and you are now, shall we say, at a different rung on the ladder, a different level of awareness. You learn from everything and you carry everything in whatever state of learning has processed through you. It is most true that a great incarnational lesson that is common to all those who take incarnation is simply forgiving oneself for the choices made in coming into incarnation. Before incarnation, everything looks pretty easy. Standing outside the incarnational miasma of what this instrument would call the world of Maya or illusion, your memory is intact. You understand who you are. You understand the goals and the missions that you have set for yourself for this particular incarnation. You understand the use of pain and suffering and the necessity for it, the gift of it indeed. For it is this very displacing pain that alerts one to some situation that needs to be worked out, some patterns that need to be resolved. You see it all very clearly and as a whole. Then you plunge into the womb and the parent's arms, and everything clouds over and nothing is simple. Until you enter through the gates of death into larger life, and again regain your complete memory and are able to see your life as a whole. The incarnation itself is spent with at least a substantial portion of your time being given over to trying to figure out what the situation really is, what is really going on, what you are really seeing, what you are really hearing, what is really coming into your perceptive web. And here is where faith enters in. By faith, you can simply affirm that all is well, that what you need is coming to you, and that what you have to give is something for which there is an audience. By faith, you can know that you are useful, even if you are stuck in bed, sick as a dog, and unable to do anything. By faith, even if you are stuck in a job where you do not see how you are truly helping, you can know that you are helping because you are you. And the love with which you do that job is the greatest gift in the world and one worthy to be given. We ask you then to explore the resource of faith and to ask for help because there is a strong support system available designed specifically for you and involving quite a few entities who have been drawn to you because of the beauty of your soul and the fervor of your seeking. They must be asked before they can help. Once you ask for this support, you will find it everywhere. It's funny because the question that was leading this off had to do, or no, it wasn't this one, but there was some other person that a questioner was describing where they were obviously depressed to the point of being self-harming, but they insisted that they did not want help. So how do you serve, right? Um, one way is to not manufacture a sense of urgency such that you have to be the sole person going in there and fixing everything, right? To be able to accept that this pain, just like you've held it in your heart, is in that person's heart. And that in the world of the illusion, it's going to be a tragedy. And that's just the way it is sometimes. Sometimes we can help. Um, it's a difficult thing to serve, and there was another excerpt on this, but I don't want to do all the talking here. Did you have something that you wanted to add?
In a lot of ways, like, I think what can make the depression worse, any depression, is we're not really taught or raised to accept all of our emotional states. Like, we're kind of, at least I was, and I feel like the school here in the US, they kind of like teach you that emotions, there's bad emotions, there's good emotions, and you're not supposed to feel bad. Um, generally speaking, like that's like it's not like there's that feeling down, barring something like a death in the family, but feeling down in general is not a normal condition to occasionally feel, and it, it's almost implies that there's something wrong, so to speak, right? In the sense of wrong, in the sense of like this expectation that it shouldn't have, whatever is bothering you shouldn't have happened, and other people don't get bothered by it. And in a lot of ways, that mentality kind of, it doesn't let you see life for what it is, in that there's joys and sorrows, and part of it is accepting all of that and letting it flow through you. And it's only by doing so, and there's a quote where it talks about it elsewhere, it's only by doing that do you actually fully feel both the joy and the sorrow, is by feeling the sorrow, feeling the depression, allowing yourself to feel that way, and then moving past it.
Yeah, I'd like to just read that quote because I think I know the one you're talking about. It's February 28th, and it's a Latouille. So the question is like, I've been experiencing periods of depression, periods of inability to interact in anything near a harmonious way with other people around me, and they're asking for help. Um, and Latouille responds, first of all, may we say that in truth there can be no mistakes, for this illusion you find yourself within, each of you, is an experience which has the purpose of teaching. Each of you, in some way, seeks to learn the lessons of love. These lessons, in the particular case of which you now speak, concern learning to love the self, learning to accept the self as the self is and expresses daily, learning to forgive the self for that which is felt to be less than desired. The state of mind which you call depression is simply the realization consciously that the self has not been accepted. But again, we say there are no mistakes. You have each moment that you experience in your daily round of activities an opportunity to see yourself in many reflections, to see yourself in the faces of those you meet, to see yourself in the activity which you undertake, to see yourself within your own mind and your own heart, to accept yourself, to love yourself, to know that at the core of your being lies perfection, lies the creation, lies the infinite love and light that binds all of creation. You have presented to you with each waking moment an infinite array of opportunities to see this unity of self evolve. In order to see that unity, it is most frequently necessary to first be presented with the illusion of separateness, the illusion of the self which is not perfect, the illusion of the self which is filled with mistakes, and the illusion of the feeling and inability to accept the self. So, just to interject here, I would like the listener to consider that depression and this rejection of self that it entails, this cutting off of the connection and the experience of this kind of solitude and dissatisfaction is an important part of experiencing the self as creator. It is. Nithin, you put a very fine point on it. Just because it feels bad doesn't mean it's wrong. To continue with Latouille, to learn the lesson most fully, to drive it deepest within the heart of your being, it is necessary first to experience the opposite of what is true, the illusion of imperfection, of separateness. In your meditations, attempt then to see the perfection of being. Attempt to see how each opportunity you have encountered, each thought of a depressing nature you have welcomed, has presented you an opportunity both ways, as imperfect and as perfect. See the choices that you have made and, inaudible, have been swayed towards the imperfect. See then the opportunity for perfection. For does not each opportunity teach? Have you not noticed each opportunity's lessons? Indeed you have, for you have noted your own failures, as you call them, but look at them in another light. Have they not shown you the depth of your being, the range of your feelings, the possibilities of your learning? To be alive and aware in your illusion is a state of mind and perception which few among your people enjoy. For they have been, shall we say, deadened to the world around them, the world about them, I should say, and the world within them. Therefore, rejoice in the feelings which surge within your being, and see, therefore, the other side of the illusion, which is the truth of your own perfection, your oneness, and the love light that dwells within you, that dwells within you, that dwells with you. Attempt then in your waking hours to continue the feeling you develop in your meditations, so that a new light is shed on the experiences which you encounter. Do not forget you have it. Do not forget you can have it an illusion. That can't be right. I think that might be, do not forget you inhabit an illusion. I don't know. Uh, do not forget it has but one purpose, to teach that you are whole and perfect, acceptable, and loved. So I think it's really important for people to understand the function of depression. In fact, it reminds me of this blog post I read like probably 15 years ago from some sort of radical political writer, where he was basically making the point that it's kind of unhealthy not to be depressed about the state of the world. Like it's who is it that said, I think it was Gandhi, to be well adjusted to a world as broken at this is really no accomplishment at all. You know, like this world is in some ways designed to break us down, and it is designed to empty us out. But that is not the end of the story. That's the point. If we're in the world, if we're in the capsule of experience that a day comprises, and that day is a bad day, and all we know is waking material life, then you're trapped. That's all you know. That's the entire horizon. But if you see a bigger truth, if you see a bigger process involved, and that your day is the middle of something bigger, not the beginning and end, then you can use that opportunity, because you have the ability to see it not as the whole of the issue, but just one small part of it.
Yeah, I think that last paragraph, looking back on my experiences of, because I've, early in life I was definitely depressed for like years on end, and then luckily I decided to kind of address it as a spiritual issue. Didn't it didn't go away overnight. That maybe like another 5 years of healing, but looking back, it was through that process of trying to accept that depression that I experienced probably some of the most intense emotions in terms of just a green ray of having compassion for yourself and the difficulty of your own situation, um and another maybe a green ray or even indigo ray concept of just surrendering your experience to the one infinite creator, and just letting it wash over you. The experiences were very potent once I was actually able to view it in that light and experience them in that light. Uh, Obviously, they're experiences of emotions you typically um, don't necessarily look forward to having, but we're not just here to only have the good stuff, right? It just being able to feel and experience that deep despair, that sorrow, that then the resulting compassion for yourself, and the ultimate um, surrendering your experience as the experience of the one infinite creator, right? For it's a very potent experience that typically you need. I think it can only really be achieved when you're having those deep depressions in a way, and in a certain sense it helps you appreciate the joyful experiences all that much more.
Absolutely. You're you're meeting my train of thought in programming this recording like almost perfectly. So the the first one what I'm thinking about is how this experiencing both the good and the bad is kind of the background for the overarching process, which is transformation of the self. This is another word for that spiritual evolution that we're constantly harping on. And over 30, well, maybe that's not the right one. Yeah. So let's do May 20th, 1984. Uh, so this is right around the time when Don is really going through a tough time. And Carla asks, "Of course, I've got Don on the brain, but I don't know what to ask. If you would like to comment, you're welcome. Such questions as how can we help? How can he help himself? Do people really get better on that medication? Am I worrying too much?" And other questions like that. You can pick any of those. What is the nature of depression? What causes one person to be hurt terribly by exactly the same circumstances that two other people going through bitching and moaning the whole time, but retaining sanity, my bad. And Latouille responds, "We shall then choose the latter." Oh, sorry. "I am Latouille and believe we have queries enough to attempt a choice of one. We shall then choose the latter, which seems to have the greater degree of interest. The depression, which is experienced by the one known as Don, has the purpose, as all catalyst does, of allowing balance to be achieved. One may look at the One may look at that called depression and see that the potential for its opposite is being created. For one to be in despair, to be pressed down by the weight of one's own fears, is an action which has as its balance the transformation of the fear and the self, so that there shall be a rising up in joy and faith. The greater the pressing down, the greater the potential for the rising up. This is a great transformative experience for any to attempt. Yet remember, my sister and my friends, that within your illusion, truth is still the truth. The one creator exists within each moment and being in full at all times. And this entity which now moves through the moment of the illusion of depression shall present to itself the opportunity to move into a moment in which it is fully realized that the one creator has always been present, is present now, and shall always be present. And the rising up in joyful thanksgiving for this knowing is that which awaits the one which has pressed itself down with its own fears, that it is alone and is not enough to meet the occasion which it feels must be met. That kind of sounded like what you were talking about, Nithin, that it's kind of like a spring almost, right? Yeah, you have to like push that spring down, and you have to have that force that then gives you that ability to bounce back up. There was one other session that talked about transformation and the weight of it that I think is worth talking about. And it's Kuo speaking on July 12th, 1992. And they say, one thing we do recommend for all who experience confusion, and I interpret confusion the way they're talking about it here is a way of talking about depression, right? Depression just being a variety of confusion. One thing we do recommend for all who experience confusion is a very well encouraged sense of humor. The most helpful point of view for a changing spiritual seeker is lighthearted irreverence. Play with that which is occurring. Be playful. Allow the vision to relax, the eyesight to become less than entirely single mindedly keen. When the pressure mounts and the anxiety builds, when frustration and anger begin to accumulate, lighten your own load with laughter. And if you can laugh with another, the strength of this joy is doubled. Part of the service spiritual seekers may be to each other is to exhort and encourage each other to take it easier with the situation and the self. So just to jump in, like, it's not just learning how to do the light touch ourselves, but encouraging that light touch, that playful balance that only you can achieve. I don't know what your playful balance is, but I know when I can tell when you're suffering. I can tell when you're too serious. And so to just be with you and to be capable of maybe a little bit modeling that light touch and that lightness, I can totally see that being helpful. To continue with Kuo, many are the times when a serious seeker feels very inadequate to that which he wishes to accomplish. The earnestness begins to become more tight and urgent. The seriousness is taken further and further until this beau geste consumes one. To a point, this intensity is helpful. I think this is really where we're getting to the crux of the matter. This intensity is helpful to a point, but Kuo continues, beyond that point, It always needs to be remembered that the most serious things in a life experience are made more clear and understandable by the enhancement of turning the spotlight off the seriousness of the situation and onto the beauty, the praiseworthy beauty of the overall plan. When one may praise the plan and give thanks for going through the necessary confusion, one is then taking very seriously and single mindedly the transformation itself, but has let up on the pressure on the self to do, quote, such and such, or not to do, quote, such and such, in conjunction with the transformation. This is, and just to jump in, there's this, the seriousness wants to have a program within the illusion for how this shall be prosecuted. But the lighter self recognizes that getting out of your own way is the key, and that knowing how it's all going to play out is a lie, is a figment of your imagination. It's a defense mechanism against the mystery that will nourish your soul and revitalize your seeking. To continue, Kuo says, to take the principles, the ideals seriously is excellent. To take the self seriously is folly. I mean, what could be more instrumental as a self? To take the point is not to focus on the mirror, or sorry, the window. It's to focus on the light and the image coming through the window. And that light and image, that's the creator trying to shine through each of us into an illusion. Kuo continues, let the self be human. Laugh at this humanity. Love it, and see that it is perfectly normal to fear that which is painful. I think that is just so compassionate, so meeting people where they're at. It is normal to fear that which is painful. It is not a sign that you are broken or wrong or going down the wrong path to have a little bit of fear of that pain, of that depression, of that stuckedness. You wouldn't be a seeker if you didn't fear that, you know? Kuo continues.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's having an accepting and loving relationship with your own fears, and understanding that just because you feel fear doesn't necessarily mean you have to immediately act from a place of fear to control it, right?
Yes, fear has this wonderful way of taking all of our attention, grabbing it all, and being the whole thing that we're paying attention to. I think that's a second density consciousness left over of, oh my God, there's a threat. It has to have my full attention so I can survive. And we are now in a situation where the threats to our survival are not ones that are immediate in the moment. They are longer term organizational things. If I could be forgiven for bringing the political back. Anyway, Kuo continues. I don't have much more here. In this group, there is not the holding of the fear to the self, for which we would need to request correction. There is only the judgment of the self by the self as the self sees that it has fear. May we say that, in our opinion, fear is normal and healthy reaction to pain. When you were small, you recoiled from the touch to the oven. This was wise. Now you put yourself to more subtle testing of the boundaries and nature of your journey. You will frequently touch something very hot and have the healthy fear, which allows you to recoil and remove the self from spiritual or mental pain. Allow yourself to move naturally and vulnerably through the unknown. Accept and love the fear, the frustration, the anger. Note them, honor them, comfort the self experiencing them, but do not deny their appropriateness. And here was the real kicker here for me. Why should you not feel the difficult process happening? Why should the changes not cause many bumps, stops and starts, and discomforts, which express themselves in manifestations of fear, anger, and frustration? When the unknown has been penetrated by desire, the new country cannot even be seen. A transforming individual is mapping for the first of many times, remember the spiral, the new and changing territory of the road. The way is mazed and muddled, and in many ways the sensing self is blinded by so much incoming data concerning a novel situation. The computer mind of the physical body gives many, many alarms when receiving this kind of data from the meta program. The resulting fear, anger, or frustration is completely understandable and acceptable, at least to us. Kuo is saying, straight up, it's okay to be depressed. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have a period of rejection of yourself, because these aren't the whole thing that is happening to you. Transformation is the whole thing that's happening to you. And it presents itself through the illusion in so many different states of consciousness, like we talked about before, that our desire to like take charge of it and sort of figure out, okay, am I on the right path? Am I not on the right path? And to make those decisions based on the murky signals that come from what the illusion reflects to us uh, is not completely wrong, but it's just not entirely accurate, right?
Absolutely. And it kind of first started from my healing of depression. The multiple times I probably had it over different situations. It came from obviously a place of healing, a desire for healing that started into this inquiry of saying, okay, let's actually practice what some of these philosophies say, that this is all internal, and really applying, you know, just asking yourself, how can I apply like love through the energy centers concepts? Because love is very generic, and the energy centers or even the Hindu chakras, they break it down into distinct portions that are more understandable, right? Is there a fear of a particular area, or is that actually, can I transform that to love? Like, right, red ray, love. Just very quickly, I'm sure all the viewers have heard this, but like red ray, is there a fear about daily life, loving life? Orange ray, is there fear about something relating to myself or in individual relationships, or can I transform that to love? And going on through the energy centers, and then putting into practice a decision about whatever is depressing you from a place of love, a faith. A lot of it is faith, because once again, it's that tension between physical reality is primary, and maybe there's a spiritual reality, but it's kind of in the background, right? As opposed to, no, at the very least, in order to have this leap of faith, in order to do it from a place that is not fearful, you kind of at least have to get to the idea that there's parity. You don't necessarily have to believe the spiritual reality is the primary one, although I think that is what is true. But if if you can at least get to parity, you can start implementing some of these things. And honestly, I did it for my own, basically issues I was struggling with earlier in my life, but also, for other areas of catalyst that have been, I would say, lifelong lessons, putting them into play. So, for example, fears about being inadequate in the workplace, right? And just being like, okay, I can work late, but is it going to come from a place of inadequacy, like I'm effed if I don't? Or I'm going to give myself permission because this is coming from a place of love, acceptance of my own desire to rest, as well as my own desire to help others and to balance everything. And in this particular situation, I might choose to stay late, or I might not choose to stay late. And either one is 100% okay. And it's not just I'm trying to make myself feel better, but really that is the bread and butter of spiritual transformation. I have faith that if I make this decision, even if it backfires once, if I consistently make this decision and process those fear, the whatever remaining fear there is, it will result in not just a better outcome for me, but it is the process of spiritual transformation. Your reality ends up changing completely. You start to have a feedback with reality, like not a feedback, like a conversation. And it's just amazing that when you start applying these in your daily life to the spiritual problems you're having, it's like reality will start to change in the most magical of ways. And it really feels like it changes when I think in essence what happens is reality is always responding to you. But when you had those fears early on, it created a feedback loop around your fears. And then once you're like, no, I'm no longer going to operate from a place of fear and control, I might end up doing the exact same thing, but it's coming from a place of love and allowance and acceptance. the feedback loop with reality, that conversation completely changes, and it's frankly amazing. And I encourage everyone who's open to that to just start trying it out. But once again, it's you have to get there organically. You have to be ready. So start implementing these things in smaller things in your life to organically build faith. I mean, you can take a huge leap of faith, but I noticed in my life when I did what I thought was a huge leap of faith, there were times it was a genuine leap of faith, but there was other times where I'm like, I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid. I just want this to go away. I'm going to act like I believe. And when I faked the faith, I would often attract the fear again. So it's a subtle distinction, but it's truly taking a genuine leap of faith as opposed to, oh, I've read the law one, I know everything's one, so I'm just gonna act as if I have no fear. That personally didn't work well for me. Now it did help me. It did help me learn the lesson, but it did so by attracting that fear really quickly. Like
There you go.
exactly what I feared immediately happened as like hitting me in the face, and then I realized, oh, I wasn't really taking a genuine leap of faith. But in a strange sense, it still worked out.
See, I wonder if the thing that you started on, how that plays into this sincerity of faith versus this kind of like kayfabe when we're talking about, because I have several excerpts here from Kuo in the mid 2000s that talk about the role of red ray in all of this. And what makes red ray so crucial amongst all the other rays is that it's the first place where that energy can be choked off. If you have a red ray blockage, you're not engaging with others or yourself in a healthy way. You're not engaging with society in a healthy way. You have no resources for the kind of unconditional love that can gush out into the world. It's funny because I think Kuo kind of goes back and forth on whether depression causes red ray blockage causes depression. It's probably like two sides of the same coin. On November 24th, 2007, Kuo says, that which tends to block red ray is a level of depression that argues against life in the joy of life and difficulties with sexuality. Because of the fact that red ray deals with matters of survival and sexuality, those who are limping along with no true appreciation of life are going to be limiting the flow of energy into their very first chakra, and therefore receiving into the heart only a fraction of the power of the energy that is available from the Creator. On May 10th, 2008, Kuo says, what is not usually understood about red ray is that it is not only the ray of sexuality, but also the ray of survival. It is the ray in which you must say either yes or no to life itself. Very important right there to interject. Kuo continues, many of those whose feelings of depression and unhappiness for various reasons has begun to shut down or at least narrow that red ray. Somehow, sharing these woes with another whose ears are open to listen begins to get the red ray open again, begins to make life seem good again. The colors brighten, energies lift, and the conversation goes on. And you can kind of see why that would be the case, because if you are experiencing catalyst as wrongness, and the catalyst is entering your body through the feet, right through the earth, coming up through you and going hitting each of these centers. If it's stopping right at red ray, you have no resources to do any kind of spiritual work other than to, in some cases, kind of just wait out your antipathy towards life itself. It's not like on October 8th, 2006, Kuo says, despair is often a blockage within the very lowest of chakras, but it seldom is as simple as a one chakra problem. And I think it's important to not reduce depression to just a red ray blockage, but to understand that the way that it manifests will interact with our other blockages, and specifically interact with them in a way in which you're working with less. So of course you're going to want to deal with your problems less. Of course you're going to want to withdraw. Of course you're going to feel that isolation and withdrawing from social situations, withdrawing even from yourself, as I described earlier, is going to be a way to kind of tread water, to use that metaphor before, in the cup of soup, that great metaphor. And so I think what's useful about this, Nithin, is that if you know that there are 7 answers to your question of what's wrong with me, not just one, then you have a way of contemplating a shift of perspective that doesn't require you to fake it. Does that make sense? Like you can enter into the orange ray chakra and you can say, I despise this person that I am right now, but I'm here and I can be there and sit with that. And I think that a lot of what depression is it's not a problem to be solved. It's kind of waiting out a storm within the self. Obviously, there are depressions that are much more serious and that lead to awful outcomes. And I don't mean to just spiritually bypass all of that. That there's catalyst that goes awry, and there's catalyst that goes really, really awry. And that's part of the creation too, as tragic as it is. But if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to consider the possibility that your depression is not the single problem that if you just solve it, everything will be better. It is instead a part of the fabric of your lessons, and that it's in a way good that you're experiencing it, because the only way that we know to unblock things is to experience the blockages as this kind of concrete thing that, yes, we struggle against. That is the experience of being blocked, is the struggle against it and the giving up in many cases temporarily of the struggle. It's and yet some of us are overcome by it. And that's also an experience. And it's not a pleasant one, but it is something that is I think especially in our world, it's late capitalist, early 21st century, the role of the self in relating to all of these systems and all of these processes around which we've built a self can feel very, very, make one feel very small and very insignificant, and that one either serves mammon or one just withdraws into a hole and like tries to live off the land or something, and that's the choice that the illusion provides you. But you actually have 7 choices, not just one.
Absolutely. And, there's some other quotes that talk about how a lot of these things come from personal lessons, and they'll keep on showing up in various forms. But I think what makes it complicated, especially for people who live in today's society, right? Whether it's interacting with friends or engage in social media or watching, television, there's also thought forms that affect the planet, and they can sometimes energize or have at least some sort of influence. Sometimes they can make you kind of make it harder to unravel what's going on inside of you. So, I think there's been many studies, for example, that when someone is depressed, for some forms of depression, that equivalent to taking antidepressants is doing I think a 1 hour walk in nature or a hiking trail, which also kind of directly ties back to Confederation philosophies, which say that the undistorted fourth density energies are there, but typically it's very difficult to immediately access them unless you are literally in nature, because when we're in society, we're much more bombarded by the societal overlay of thought forms and just basically a different energy field than what Mother Earth is naturally vibrating at.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up, because it reminded me that I think one of the things, it didn't get me out of depression, but it made it very clear what I was missing was taking a extended backpacking trip at Shenandoah National Park with my wife, I think last weekend, and doing meditations, sitting on a rock next to a babbling brook, next to a waterfall, just being out in nature, connecting with these elemental energies. I I am not the kind of person who like can feel things and all that. Like it's all I can do to like make contact, guys. But it did feel like a different. It's like it was like it felt like me as a life form, as an entity, was taken out of a hole and put on a pedestal. Not in the sense of like singling me out, but in the sense of like I was lifted out of something and could, instead of being trapped, I was like seeing the full energetic weight of myself for the first time in a long time. And that was really, and I'm really grateful to Tasha for, because she backpacks like nearly every weekend, dude. She is a monster when it comes to this stuff. And I don't want to do that, honestly. But I definitely think that I needed it. And it comes from, remember, there's this idea. I don't have excerpts offhand, but especially in the 70s, where I've been spending a lot of time on the Conscious Library, there's a lot of talk contrasting the creation of man to the creation of the Father. The world, the constructed world that we inhabit, that's kind of like a subset of the possibilities of consciousness in this yellow ray matrix that we inhabit of society and jobs and relationships and all that. And then the creation of the Father, the natural creation, the actual creation, the creation that was created before we created our thing on top of it, that has a natural balance and a natural cycle to it that can inform and demarcate your own cycles and your own. Maybe it doesn't give you the exact point you are on the map of transformation, but it gives you a sense that there is a point that you are at on it. And that alone can be enough to prompt that faith. Just to have that feeling, that uncertain feeling, but that nevertheless is reassuring.
Well said. And I
Um,
remember talking to you immediately after you had gotten back from your trip, and
oh yeah.
you sounded so refreshed. It wasn't just like the sound of your voice, like your energy was just like rejuvenated. You know, it was amazing.
The crazy thing is that I didn't really get good sleep out there, but it didn't matter, because I don't know. Lately, I haven't been getting good sleep no matter what I do. Um, so we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. There's a July 6th, 1987 quote that I'd like to finish on that starts to go into the archetypal subjects. Was there anything that you wanted to cover before I went there?
No, I think
Okay,
this is perfect.
just making sure. Um, so this is probably the session that is the most relevant to the subject of depression as a topic of an entire session. Unfortunately, it's cut off at the end, but there's so much good stuff in here. It's July 26, 1987. Um, so Kuo says, uh, where should I go with this? So I talked earlier about depression as this kind of cutting off of the food of the soul. Um, yeah, let me just start there. Kuo says, it has been written in your holy work, known as the Bible, that the master known as Jesus is a vine and his students branches thereof. Nithin, just jump in anytime you want to, okay? Continuing, if you consider yourself as a cosmic citizen, you and all other consciousness in the universe are rooted in one vine, that is the life-giving vine of love. We use that word, although it is inadequate to express the mystery of the Creator, because as ill used as that word is among your peoples, it nevertheless evokes knowledge of the most extreme of human emotions. Pure, living love, stemming directly from the uncreated in perfect order, in perfect love, is a force unimaginable in magnitude, a force which has propelled into being all consciousness, and a force which wishes to assist each portion of consciousness in its full circle through experience and back to the source of love, that which is uncreated, that which is always the same, the one great original thought. Depression is one of many human experiences, as you would call them, in which a branch of the vine is damaged by the cutting off of the supply of food from the root. The invisible strangling of love can come about because of many circumstances. In its worst cases, one may observe its results, those personalities which do not have an emotional bias against murder, theft, and so forth. When one looks for the invisible garret that has so strangled love within such an entity, one cannot see it, although earnest scholars equate the loss of life giving emotion with lack of love or even lack of a home in the murderer's early years. With the emotional experience of depression, we may see a person which is experiencing a strangulation, to a certain extent, a loss of love from the root. And when the person looks to see what the source of the strangulation of love might be, again it is invisible, for it has taken place within the mind itself. If and then they say, if this material concerning what depression is not satisfactory, we gladly invite your queries after we have concluded the opening discussion. So just housekeeping there. Kuo continues, and this is a very important, I think, when we talk about the illusion. Now, it is not merely an illusion to say that you're experiencing depression. Indeed, we feel that overemphasis on all being an illusion is perhaps detrimental to the balanced progress of a seeker. And Jeremy's hearing tons of spiritual bypassing in there, right? How many times have we been going through a difficult thing to have a spiritual friend say, it's all an illusion, you'll get over it. It's not an illusion when it hurts. To continue, Kuo says, it is well to attempt to gaze at and consider the self in all of its vagaries. The one who attempts to change depression by denying negative feelings, this goes back to what you were saying about faking faith, I think, by denying negative feelings is perhaps on the right track. However, that person has little chance of creating an easement of the strangulation of love simply by speaking it so. For in depression, that which ties the cord too tightly around the vine, that which holds back the supply of love, is a desire to hold in the mind circumstances which seem unacceptable. This desire, whether quite conscious or relatively unconscious in nature, has a very adverse effect upon the supply of the life-giving energy of love, which is falling constantly into each of the portions of the Creator's consciousness. Thus, large portions of the subconscious mind begin to be distracted from processing the catalysts of the present in terms of the present, and begin to process catalysts in terms of an unacceptable portion in the memory of one who is depressed. That's something I didn't catch before. They're talking about the present moment versus kind of living in the past. Very interesting. They continue. It is as if there were a drag upon an engine, so that the engine had to work harder and harder to produce the same amount of work. Or perhaps even better as an analogy, it is as if in a depressed person, the unacceptable thing creates a blockage in the fuel line, so that the engine of the mind is ultimately unable to function. Since the entity who is depressed can only blame itself, a dissociation almost inevitably begins within the mind of the depressed person, which then adds to the inertia that is dragging down or to block the fuel in the fuel line that is keeping fuel from the engine of consciousness. Right here, I think there's a red ray corollary. It's pretty obvious. Kuo continues. It is as if there were two consciousnesses, one healthy and free and thriving, which exists in our dreams and at the core of all illusion, and that consciousness which has come to a standstill, getting instead of love a fueling supply of fear and anxiety. Because the rupture lies within the self, it is most efficacious for the depressed entity to call upon two general archetypes. First, it is well to call upon the archetype which you have in essence conjured up in the process of self-strangulation. That is, your consciousness has made the self its own scapegoat. Some there are in your illusion which go through a lifetime of incarnation, never blaming themselves for anything. These entities move in a sleepy existence and do not trouble their hearts or their digestions with a conscience. Oof, that's rough. And also, like, I didn't think about if there is an archetype in the 22 archetypes that might map to the scapegoating one. I'll have to think about that. To continue, we speak to those who are sensitive and creative enough to pay attention to their consciousnesses, to ask themselves questions, and to seek in whatever way they can. After gazing at the scapegoat and considering how little you truly wish to make yourself such an archetype, it may then be efficacious for the one who is depressed to consider the archetype of the unfed consciousness. We have spoken a great many words about consciousness in the opportunities we have had to communicate with this group. You know that to us it is a synonym for the words spirit or soul. You know that consciousness is almost never seen without some distortion. Depression is merely a very disturbing distortion. We say to you that depression is impossible in a consciousness that is new. If an entity gazes about itself at any point in the lifetime experience, it will see some things which are pleasing and some things which are not. The consciousness has been your source of life, which has been your source of life, sees the creation with eyes of love. For it is love, and in this love all things are as they should be. Contradistinctive to undistorted love is the operation of free will, which moves within each particle of consciousness in such a way as to make choices possible. Thus, the new consciousness, by the operation of free will, would turn each moment like a stone to see each facet of beauty, unity, and love, or perhaps to marvel at those balances which are particularly unusual in those about it. This new consciousness is that which the depressed entity may acquire not only through meditation, but also through remembering at each moment when it is first noticed that the experience of depression is becoming active. There is another portion as well to new consciousness, and that is its insatiable curiosity. Let the curiosity of the unfed consciousness sink into every thought process that has been stultified by the distortion of depression. Curiosity is that which can unblock ... tape ends, which is a dang shame because I think that's one of the best sessions I've read in a while. Well, that the archetype of the unfed new consciousness, that's obviously matrix of mind. So right away, like all the stuff we talked about last year with respect to archetypes has in this QO session an actual use. It has an actual thing that you can put to work in your own life in a concrete way that won't solve all your problems, but will help you deepen your understanding of the archetype through the material of your own life, not through the material of a curriculum that I or somebody else would put together that would just instruct you on what to think. And yeah, I'm really happy that there's a connection somehow between this archetypal work that we did and the experience that I went through. That I can see that there's like room that's opened up in my life for new stuff, and it's that curiosity for new stuff that really drives me forward. I've done a whole episode on curiosity because I think that eagerness to discover what's right over the hillside that you can't see, like that's that love of life that's like rooted in the red ray, and it's primal. It's not something that by the time I've even thought about in terms of curiosity, it's already had its expression and has filled one up, you know?
Yeah, it's like an interesting mix of like curiosity, red ray curiosity, but it's almost like intertwined with like faith that the future, like that it's all going to make sense in the end, you know? And so you're curious to see not just how it turns out, but like what other wonders and joys are going to be brought into your life, and knowing and having that faith that that's, you know, the way that reality kind of works. And the only thing that is there to stop that is really yourself, right?
The image came to mind of somebody clinging to the wreckage of a ship versus letting the current pull them away to possibly the shore, possibly their death, but something else, right? Something new, something that will move the story forward.
It's that's both a horrible and a great analogy. I love it because it's so true.
Even if
You
you
know?
die, that's a renewal as well.
Yeah.
So, well, you
Well,
want to leave it
it's like
there? Sorry.
I mean it's like, it's asking the seven questions through, through the energy rays, and getting to a place where, you know you were thinking about letting go of the shipwreck, because you're like, shit, am I gonna die? First, your first thoughts, to play this analogy because I like it. Your first thoughts are, I'm so scared. I need to survive. What am I gonna do? Panic, and you're gonna release the shipwreck from a sense of fear. But then, if you're able to do the work in the moment and realize, you know, accept what might come, then you're still faced with the decision: do I hold on or do I let go? And it just is, it's interesting how you can almost do the exact, and we've talked about this when we talk about acceptance and also faith, because they're very interrelated, that you can often do this exact same initial step of action from your given situation, your catalytic situation, but you can do it from a completely different place. And often, depending on the place you're doing it from, the exact same step will often result in a completely different outcome.
Very similar to the point about the spiraling, right? You're in the same situation that you recognize, and yet it's different. It's the same and it's different. And this is the qualitative mode of living that spirituality encourages. Not just like, counting what's in our wallet, counting how many days we have before we retire, um, counting how many days we've been depressed, but instead like releasing ourselves to something that is a whole different thing, that isn't about counting. It's the whole thing that's being counted has changed. Okay. Well, I think this is a great return, Nithin, and I'm glad that I get the sense that you and I have a little more room in our lives where we can. I mean, we've the trend has been recording every 2 weeks, so, or sorry, not 2 weeks, 2 months, and I'm fine with that pace. But
We can beat that pace. I mean, I think I don't know how much the viewers knew, but I got married right around 5 months ago. But it was, there's life was very, very, very busy for the past, frankly, almost 9 months. So it's finally like coming back to normal, So yeah, I definitely think we should start back up regularly.
life transforming from the hectic kind of suck to the more roomy kind of suck that we all have. But
Absolutely.
it sucks, and then it also is wonderful. So what are you going to do? All right. You want to leave it there?
Perfect.
Well, thanks for joining me. Thanks so much, listeners, for sticking with us through this long hiatus. Please keep in touch with us. We want to hear from you. And in the meantime, dear friends, stay in the love and light.